you ever have that special story in your heart, a story that you grew up with, and despite knowing its faults and maybe even feel disappointed with, you can't truly change your heart on it because at the end of the day, you can't deny the impact it had? That's me with Bleach. This video is not going to be a in-depth series review. That would deserve a far more serious effort on my part. But to celebrate Halloween, I thought I'd go over my history with Bleach. To this day, I still love the series for what it is. A story that helped me go through difficult times, introduced me to characters that I'll remember for the rest of my days, and taught me the value of storytelling, both in positive and negative terms. So obviously, that being said, spoilers are going to be all over the place, so this is your warning. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Tiger Discussions, a weekly show where I relax and just talk about anything I want, and the topics are voted up on my Twitter. Last week we talked about Jiren from Dragon Ball Super, and what I would do to rewrite the character. This time around, it's just a trip down memory lane. You won't hear me complain too much or have a segment wishing that this would happen instead of this. It's not going to be like that. I guess you can call this an overall reaction to the series. So with that out of the way, let's begin. To properly start this off, we need to go back to my middle school days. Before everything went digital, I would still use my allowance to go to my local bookstore to read up on everything cool at the time. There were only 3 comics I was actively reading back then: Rurouni Kenshin, Naruto Part 1, and the Sonic the Hedgehog Archie comic book series. I mentioned last episode that I was first introduced to Dragon Ball through Dragon Ball Z Budokai 1 for the GameCube. At that time, I just let the games and the Toonami reruns do the work for me. It wouldn't be until around high school did I ever give the manga a serious shot. Same thing applied to Yu Yu Hakusho, and there was also Yu-Gi-Oh, but the manga wasn't given a shot until my college days. But you might be wondering, where does Bleach fit into all of this? That came along in my high school days. I have a best friend, a practical brother named Justin. If you're a subscriber, you might have seen him before my Cards Against Humanity stream, and you'll be hearing him in an upcoming riff that we did along with another brother named Marshall when we took a look at the Fantastic Four movie from the 90s. That's going to be really fun to show you guys. Now, Justin was responsible for my expansion into general mangas: Shonen Jump, Fullmetal Alchemist, Black Cat, and of course, Bleach. He would often go on to talk about how cool the story was and also how big Ronkiku's boobs were. We often made jokes about that subject, but that was because we were just dumb teenagers back then. But I was interested in seeing how this Bleach story was so cool. So one day, Justin let me borrow volume 19 of the Bleach manga. What was in that book? Nothing special. Only Ichigo versus Byakuya and the build-up to one of the greatest plot twists known to all of mankind. Perfect place to start, right? But for an introduction to the series, I was blown away. The art looked clean but intense. The dialogue seemed to be more complex than most stories I was reading, whether it was other mangas or a book I had to read for school. And the action? Holy Espada. The action. That was the best part. The action all focused on swords, but these swords had superpowers behind them, and it was insane. When Byakuya's sword falls to the ground after saying this word called Bankai, I was like, what? And then flower petal blades flew out, and I was like, wait, what? And then Ichigo also says Bankai, much to Byakuya's disbelief, and I was like, what? And then Ichigo fought back at Sonic Speed, and I was like, whoa, what? And then when Byakuya recognizes Ichigo as a warrior but is about to kill him, I was like, oh shit. And then Hollow Ichigo, aka the freaking boss, or as the modern day kids say, the GOAT, shows up and demolishes Byakuya. I was like, yeah, I have many questions, but who cares? Yeah! At the time, I thought the story was inspired by Star Wars, since that too also had action focused on swords, and the drama and the conflict from both of these stories did feel familiar. Luke wants to rescue his father, and Byakuya wanted to honor his parents and dead wife. It's just a shame that death hangs around them like a shadow. From there, I was hooked. A few months later, I made sure to read the entire Bleach series after that so I could catch up, which at the time I think it was near the end of the Aizen arc. I think my memory isn't too good in that specific area. The anime, though, is a different story, but we'll get there soon enough. So as I caught up, I got to understand the world of Bleach and what made it special. The cast seemed larger than any I've seen before, but they were easy enough to remember. They had that Dragon Ball quirk that I mentioned last episode, where they have a simple character trait so that their interactions with other simple traits made stories that could last a lifetime, though they were also sprinkled with a touch of making speeches about philosophy and life and deep stuff like that. If I tried to summarize these speeches, I'm gonna have to write a novel. And with that being said, I should summarize how I feel about the cast. Let's start with the MC himself, Ichigo. Now, if you wanted a perfect example of a Shonen Jump hero, look no further than Ichigo Kurosaki. Teenager? Check. Cool design? Check. Simple power? Check. Puts friends above all else? Check. Never acknowledges someone who likes him until the final chapter? Check. Dark secret or dark monster? Check. And you can imagine where I'm going with this, right? Even though I grew up with Naruto more, I liked Ichigo, well, more. Even though he was as cliche as it gets, he did have that touch of a rebel inside him. I guess if I had to reference something, there's a little touch of Yusuke in him. Always wanting to do the right thing, but on his own terms. I can respect that choice. How about the rest of the cast? I loved the Soul Reapers. Rukia, loved her. The captains, thought they were all awesome. Except for Soifon, should have kept Yoruichi, who is easily one of the best characters. Urahara was fantastic. God, I love him. The lieutenants were cool in their own way. I still think that Renji is a little annoying, but he's harmless overall. Squad 11 was easily my favorite squad, thanks to Ikaku and Yumachika, though Kyoraku is one of my favorite captains and characters in any series. Was there a hard time sharing the spotlight with all these characters involved? Yeah, but it made me appreciate the side characters more when they got their time to shine, especially Yamamoto. Good fucking God. This man was like if Yoda was in human form and didn't give a shit about the Jedi Code. At least that's how I saw him as a kid. But what about the human characters? I thought Chad, Orihime, and Uryu were fine when they were first shown, but they never got a chance to really stand on their own. Uryu came the closest all the way up to the final arc, but their spotlights faded too fast, and I can't really blame the author Tide Kubo for that. His Soul Reaper cast was far more interesting and more relevant to the plot. So if you asked me if I prefer any human characters to, well, let's just say it, Kyoraku, I'm gonna prefer Kyoraku. Heroes, though, are only as good as their villains. And man, is Bleach infamous for a certain villain. We'll get to him soon enough. So anyway, as I caught up to Bleach, it felt like a progressive Monster of the Week sort of thing. There's a new challenge every week, but the stakes keep getting raised and the plot always moves forward. Compare that with a show like Power Rangers, or if you want to get serious, try any CW superhero show. Each had a similar formula, but their villain of the week barely connected to the core of the story. Bleach did the opposite. I really appreciated that. And even though the human characters would get replaced by the Soul Reapers, I enjoyed them. Were they like Ichigo, that is to say, a typical shonen cast of side characters? Yeah, but that was only the start of the series. I can't fault Kubo for the beginning. So yeah, the monsters of the week, aka the Hollows, were pretty cool. They reminded me of those monsters I would see time to time in Japanese art and stories. Crazy appearances, but insane in their feats and powers. Shit, though, got real in the Soul Society arc. Now, the captains of the Soul Society were the main antagonists, but they weren't villains. Their worst crimes at the time were doing their job and being oblivious to a certain god. I do like that they were all just people with their own thing to do. They each had an agenda, but when it comes time to do their job, they never back down. I think that's my favorite thing about the captains and the lieutenants in Bleach. It's their commitment to protect all life, and that the variety of their personalities makes the experience all the more enjoyable. The closest we had to full-blown villain at the time was Byakuya, because he was the main challenge, but he was also the coldest in terms of emotions. The man commanded respect and fear from all the captains. Actually, that's a lie. Most of the captains. But let's move past that. Let's talk about Aizen's betrayal. Now, I'm going to go on record, okay? I just want to speak these honest words from my soul. Aizen's betrayal was the best moment in Bleach for me and topped any twist Naruto or any shonen story I read at the time had. I love it that much. We were all led to believe that Aizen was just a wise goody two-shoes, but no. It turns out that he's just about the strongest mofo in the entire Soul Society and had everyone ensnared in his puppet strings. Aizen was as strong as he was smart. This man predicted and guided the majority of Bleach's story. I'm convinced he's Taikubo in disguise. Now, even though he was super strong, that's not what made Aizen terrifying. It was his special power, hypnosis, or illusions, whatever you want to call it. Aizen can manipulate all of your senses to make you see whatever he wants you to see, and the only way out of it is to touch his blade, which 9 times out of 10 will be impaling you. To call Aizen insanely powerful is an understatement because there really isn't a villain like him. We have ones that like to manipulate or blackmail or run a city or empire. Aizen though, his manipulation is flawless. This man was born in a laboratory by fusing the raw power of Darkseid with the mixed intelligence of Light and L and the body of Matt Bomer, the perfect being. Also, Aizen had 2 trusted comrades. The first was Gin, who everyone saw coming as a villain, but there was another plot twist, Tosin. Throughout the story, Tosin was a believer in justice, so to have him place all his faith in Aizen was surprising to say the least. Even in giant plot twists, there's room for even more plot twists. That's as Aizen as it gets. Long story short, when Aizen showed his true nature, it rocked my world. It made me question how anyone was going to fight him of all people. You know how everyone in the One Piece community right now is wondering how Luffy is going to beat Kaido? That was me with Aizen all those years ago. But the villain list isn't done yet. Hell no. So now that Aizen left Soul Society, he made his goal clear. He wants to become the king of all souls, and all he needs to do is harvest them in Ichigo's hometown. To help do that... Actually, I'm sorry. Let me rephrase that. To make sure that Aizen doesn't have to waste any effort fighting the insignificant captains of Soul Society, he creates an army of powerful soldiers called the Arrancars. They were the product of giving Hollows Soul Reaper powers. This stuff rocked my world again. Aizen is practically making more Ichigos, but now they're all Hollows. And that's not all. Above the pecking order, at the top of the food chain, are 10 Arrancars who were the strongest. They were known as the Espada, and these were the villains of my early manga life. Shishio will forever be my favorite villain of all time, and his 10 swords group were super interesting, but the Espadas as a whole were a close second back in the day, as they easily trump the 10 swords. I honestly laughed when I saw early YouTube videos of the Espadas fighting the other popular anime villain group at the time, the Akatsuki from Naruto. For me, there is no contest. Every member of the Espada were freaking awesome for me. In fact, here's my 1-sentence summary for each of them. Yami, the weak link, but his true rank made me go, oh shit, and even though he went out like a bitch, I like to hate him rather than just fully hate him. Aranero, my least favorite Espada and a disappointment in terms of combat, but as a challenge to Rukia and her character arc, I respect him, or at the very least his concept. Zael Aporo, arrogant in the right villain way, which makes his defeat one of the best in the series. Zomari, interesting way to fight, but was outmatched in every sense of the word. Noitora. I loved to hate him, but his fight was metal as hell, so I have no grudges. Ulquiorra, the symbol of the Espadas, and definitely a good character, but I think he's a tad overhyped. Hollybell. Thought she was awesome since I first saw her, and she reminded me of the boss from Metal Gear in terms of loyalty and sacrifice, so that's always a win. Berrigan. Easily the scariest Espada, and his fight is one of my favorites in any story. Stark. He should have lived, damn it, he should have lived! He was my second favorite Espada, and it has nothing to do with the fact that I relate to him in terms of loneliness, and that my favorite animal is the wolf. I'm doing a video on him, I promise you that. But wait, where's Grimmjow? Grimmjow is special. Like, he's my favorite character in the series special. I love his backstory, I love his attitude, I love his power. He's been a knock out of the park since his first introduction, and I have loved him since. I also want his new outfit, it looks rad as hell. But one of my favorite memories in life will always be this. Back in high school, Bleach was airing on Adult Swim, and Justin and I made a promise that we would have the ultimate party watching episode 166 of Bleach. It would be the best party ever, so long as we don't wake up my parents. But why was this episode so special? Because reread the manga. The anime was reaching the part where Ichigo and Grimmjow had their final duel. It may be a little hard to believe, but back then, Ichigo versus Grimmjow was the fight in anime. Back then, every fight in every anime at the time had to live to Bleach's standard. YouTube made sure of that. Forums made sure of that. Bleach was the king back then, and it was all thanks to this duel. It worked so well because this was the fight that was hyped since Ichigo first met Grimmjow. Ichigo kept progressing, Grimmjow kept pushing and torturing Ichigo. We had to sit through literal hours of filler waiting for this final showdown to come, and then it happened. On that night in the family room, Justin and I turned on channel 296, and there it was, Bleach. As the opening played, there was an intense thunderstorm happening outside. I thought the worst. I thought that this storm would knock out the TV. I was dead wrong. It made it even better. Because somehow, some way, and this I swear is the proof that God exists, but whenever Nell opened her mouth, the storm cut off Nell's dialogue at the best moments. I'll always remember how Nell was supposed to say, "What are you just standing around there for?" But instead we heard, "What are you just standing around there for?" We burst out laughing and chowing down popcorn, and the fight was beautiful. It was everything I wanted to see. To this day, few fights I've seen have matched this quality of storytelling or this quality of action. To see two characters duke it out and to have a complete and satisfying ending. So Grimmjow was easily my favorite character thanks to the experience I've had reading about him and what he's brought into my life. So as you can tell, the Espadas, the Hueco Mundo arc, and the Captains vs. Espada arc were very important to me and quite impactful. I know some people have huge issues with the Soul Society vs. Espada arc, but for me, I love the thing. Are there issues? Oh yeah. But to put it bluntly, this was, if anything, the guiltiest of pleasures. There were just so many moments that made me feel so happy to be a Bleach fan, and despite the negatives, there were never enough to bring down how I felt about this story. And just because I do not have enough time to talk about everything I loved from this entire arc, here's my list of favorite moments since the arc began up until Aizen's big fight. The Espadas are down, Gin is out of bounds, Tosin was killed. All that remained was a single lone presence in the sky. I waited years for this. All of the Bleach fans waited years for this moment. Ever since the betrayal, the stage was set to show us just how strong Aizen was. And he did not disappoint. Is it a little too ridiculous how Aizen crushes every single captain? Yeah, but the mere scale of this battle sold me. I thought it was awesome. The captains working together to actually hurt the bastard. The torture on their faces when Aizen reveals he's been toying with them this whole time through his hypnosis. And the utter domination in black and white with the faint traces of blood dripping in the sky. Beautiful. All hope was lost. It didn't matter who joined. Isshin Kurosaki, Urahara, Yoriichi, everyone important. You know what I said. Everyone important had a shot at Aizen just so they could lose. It was terrifying to watch for the first time. But this was also when I noticed that Aizen at this point kept getting stronger. Like he was somehow too implausible for the story, even though that was his main shtick. But what was it? What made him change? Oh yeah, the subtle wish-granting spear of destiny bonded to Aizen, making him evolve past his own limits and becoming something that was truly unkillable. Fuck. And this was when Bleach started to tumble. All the emotions, all the action, all the suspense. The majority of the story led to Aizen getting too strong, so Kubo had to create an awesome looking but really dumb plot device so that Ichigo was more OP than the OP god we've been watching. That's really sad. The final few chapters of this arc, or rather the last dozen episodes of this arc, were a sign that maybe Kubo didn't have everything planned out perfectly. The finale was meh at best. Were there good moments? Of course! But this was when the negatives overweighed the positives, and unfortunately this wasn't the end of Bleach's downfall. It fell down one level of stairs only for the floor to break beneath it, and it fell to the bottom of a building. To make matters worse, some floors of the building were really solid, really good foundations to build upon. But the weight and speed of the fall was too much, and Bleach overall lost his life at the end in a final crash to the ground. After the Aizen storyline, I took a break from Bleach. This was also when Justin stopped watching Bleach altogether. It wasn't because of the negativity though. To him, the story ended when Aizen fell, and I can see that logic. I remember other fans having that same mentality as well. I didn't get back into Bleach until it announced its final arc, the 1,000-Year Blood War. So once again, I was caught in another loop, catching up on an okay storyline, all so that I'm prepped for the apparent hypest arc ever. The Fullbringer arc did have some cool moments, but for me, it was only when Soul Society was on screen. Seeing these characters again after some time passed was pretty cool, and nothing will top Kenpachi killing King Bradley if he was the Hulk. Also, Ichigo vs Ginjo is a fantastic fight and I love it a lot. So now here comes the final arc. It focused on the Quincy's, a race that was built up to be amazing warriors that were the greatest enemy of all Soul Reapers. At the center of it was kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation, where sworn enemies were friends, so the worlds get torn apart by new revelations. But also at the center was the final villain, Yuha Bak. I am not going to talk about him. If I do, it has to be in its own video. If I even attempted to talk about him, this video would probably be 20 minutes longer. Same thing with Squad Zero, and I guess the arc as a whole. Bleach's final storyline was very impactful, but I can't properly talk about it without making this video far longer than it should be. I'll probably do this topic another day, but I also assume that I can sum up my feelings overall on the arc. To put it bluntly, this arc started off as, holy shit. But once the Quincy's invade Soul Society a second time, my reaction went from holy shit to, Holy shit, really? And we all know what happened from there. A rushed final battle, far too many plot holes and incomplete character arcs, and an ending that did not feel earned. It was very disappointing. If you want more in-depth looks as to how Bleach was losing its steam, go watch Tekken 101's reviews of each Bleach chapter. With every new chapter and review coming out, the negativity or critique of the story increased. It was at the end where Bleach unfortunately had its last stand, and it wasn't a really good one. There can be a lot of things to blame, from Kubo to Shonen Jump to the industry itself, but that's not what this video is about or where it's going to go. Remember how at the very beginning that Bleach helped me learn the value of storytelling? This was it right here. I have so many stories I want to bring to the world. I like to write, but I can't draw for shit. I want to share these stories, but I don't have a podium I can shout these stories from. But if there was one thing I learned, it's how to handle a story correctly so that the errors of the past don't happen again. But really, I don't want to end on a bad note. Bleach will always be special to me. Despite its faults and ending, I owe a lot to this story in terms of lessons, storytelling, and brotherhood. This was the key to the gate that opened my mind to all these other shonen stories, so at the end of the day, all I can do is say, thank you, Bleach. Fuck you for making Soy Phone, but thank you nonetheless. All that's left is to keep on wishing for that anime revival. You know you want to, anime companies! Do it! Even to this day, people still want that, so please do it! Think of all the problems you could fix in that adaptation of the final arc. Probably like 80% of it. But all in all, that brings this episode to a close. If you had a history with this series, please share in the comments. I want to hear what you guys think. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Just to let you know, this will probably be the last discussion video I do for a few weeks. In fact, don't be surprised if you don't see anything related to discussions until after Christmas. But don't worry, because there's a few things I have in mind to release in the meantime. So all that being said, take care, legends. I will of course see you all next time.